All right, everybody, let's begin our look at Homer's Odyssey, the second class on it, focusing on, in particular chapters, or books rather, 5 through 12. That's going to be the focus, but I didn't quite get through books 1 to 4 last time. In fact, I don't even think I got anywhere near through books 1 to 4, and I'm not going to get through it to the degree you would have in high school. If you remember doing literature classes in high school, if a Shakespearean play would take months to do one play. I'm doing Shakespeare right now for upper division students, and I take 3 classes or 4 on one play. So it's a lot. You get the reading is more extensive and it happens more quickly, and the comments are general and thematic, and I'm trying to draw things to your attention, but I can't replace what I assume is happening, and I've urged you to do, which is to read the stuff. So it's a lot of reading, and it's a lot of reading all at once, and I understand that, and I found myself when I was in your position a while ago, 30 years ago or something like that, that I really had a hard time keeping up. I wasn't used to the workload. But when they tell you, I think they tell you, they did tell me, that you should spend 3 hours outside the class for every one in it, they mean that, actually. It does take that much work. So you are actually you're paying not just for the lectures, but you're taking time out to study. So don't get distracted with too many things like looking at your cell phones or something, which I'm just going to turn off because it just made a terrible noise telling me that something was there, which I didn't want to see anyway. I have no doubt, not even knowing what it was. But endless distractions. Try and devote yourselves to a pattern of study. But we're looking at Homer and the Odyssey, and I talked about last time about the Council of the Gods. Let me start with that. And how the gods seem keenly interested in what is happening to this man, Odysseus. And how in particular there's a quarrel amongst the gods, and the quarrel amongst the gods, or the disagreement amongst them, to some degree explains why it's taken so long for what is fated to happen to actually transpire. So he's fated to become a great man, and the figure that we are reading about in the Odyssey, that's already been decreed. It must happen. And Zeus himself can't change the fates. The gods themselves can't change the fates. The fates in that sense are more godlike than the gods. They determine everything. There's no way of evading fate. And so that's interesting, because we now live in a fatalistic universe. The idea of free will and choosing your path and so forth is totally at odds with this understanding. But we also saw that within the gods and the Council of the Gods, there are 2 in particular that are quarreling. One of them is Athena, and she favors this man Odysseus, and she is not just any old god, she's the goddess of wisdom, the daughter of Zeus, very much prized as well by the Greeks, of course, who are renowned for wisdom, worldly wisdom. So she is of a particular interest. She is also the goddess who's chiefly revered in Athens, represented by the owl of Athena, Minerva, as she's called in Latin, the Latin language. And she wants him to get home, but she is being opposed by Poseidon. Now Poseidon, the earth shaker, has a quarrel with Odysseus because, as we're going to find out when Odysseus tells us the story, Odysseus blinded his son Polyphemus, who was a cyclops, and was so indiscreet as to tell the cyclops Polyphemus who he was. Now at this point, up to this point, he was very careful about not revealing his identity. And this fits in with the common, so he was unwise at that point. And in fact, his lack of discretion, his willingness to reveal his name to Polyphemus is what brought his father Poseidon's wrath upon him and prevented him from getting home. So there's something about naming and revealing your name, which is seen as very important here. And deceit is important. And this goes all the way back to the beginning of the Odyssey, when, and I'll tell you this because I know you haven't read the Iliad. The Iliad is a very straightforward account. It's an account of war. Achilles himself is a very straightforward individual. His words are, let his yes be yes and his no be no. And in fact, he comments on Odysseus in Book 9 of the Iliad, and he said, I despise the man who says one thing with his mouth and hides another in his heart. In other words, who's a deceiver. And this is in response to Odysseus, who's come to try and persuade him to get back into the fight. So we have two heroes, and the Iliad is told as a very straightforward account. The Odyssey, on the other hand, is a very meandering account. There's a lot of stories, and there's a lot of delayed revelation. So even at the beginning of the Odyssey, we're not even told the hero's name. And it takes a while, and in fact, even though it's called the Odyssey and it's about Odysseus, we don't even meet Odysseus until Book 5. So there's a lot of delaying, and this is characteristic of the account of the Odyssey. There's a lot of slow revelation, and there's wisdom in that. So what I'm saying is the story, the mode of storytelling in the Odyssey mirrors the character of the prime figure Odysseus. And the mode of storytelling in the Iliad, on the other hand, which is pretty straightforward, mirrors the character of Achilles, which is interesting in and of itself. Furthermore, Athena, who favors Odysseus, is renowned for wisdom, and wisdom involves deceit. On the other hand, the consequences of her action are order. And you can see whereas the consequences of the direct action of Poseidon, who's a very blunt, straightforward, just like his son, Polyphemus, who is a barbarian. He doesn't even meet in council with others. He lives on his own. He's very direct in that sense. He creates chaos and no society. So society is almost associated with deceit and delaying counsel and not going straight to the matter by Homer. So wherever Athena is at work, there is order and the possibility of home life and civility. Wherever Poseidon is at work, there's chaos. And it's represented by the sea, which is chaotic. And the Mediterranean is a very dangerous sea to sail upon. And this one word that is connected with deceit, which is used repeatedly in the Odyssey, is dolos, which simply means deceit. And it is one of the chief characteristics of Odysseus. But this is not a masculine quality. It's a feminine one.
Deceit, you said?
Deceit. A feminine quality. Because the masculine quality is to settle a quarrel by straight fight. Whereas a woman cannot win in the straight fight. She has to delay and find ways of winning other than the straight physical combat. And Odysseus is like that. When I say it's feminine, I'm not casting aspersions on the female sex, or at least that wasn't my intention. Well, that was immediately taken that way, probably, and understandably so. But that's how it's portrayed here. So I'll give you an illustration. Athena is like this herself. Very careful. If you listen to Athena's speeches, she doesn't directly oppose. She finds ways of presenting things to manipulate her father to come around to her opinion. And likewise, Penelope weaves a web of deceit to get the suitors to delay, forcing her to marry one of them. And likewise, Odysseus will regularly dissemble, that is, deceive people into doing what he wants. And the famous Trojan horse episode is an illustration of that. But we're going to find it throughout the Odyssey that Odysseus will deceive and use what is generally cast as a feminine way of getting things done, by using his words and in a way hiding what his intentions are. And the one instance when he does not do that is when he tells Poseidon, because he's not Poseidon, Polyphemus, the Cyclops, that it was he, Odysseus, sacker of cities, who had taken his eye. You asked for my name? Here's my name. It's Odysseus from Ithaca. And he says, okay, and then he cries out to his father, and he keeps him from getting home. So this is seen as a moment of Odysseus was truthful for a moment. Don't do that again. Don't reveal who you are. You're going to have to disguise yourself. Now, one of the consequences of this is that Odysseus is going to have to suffer greatly. So when he finally arrives on Ithaca, when he gets home, you would have thought after 20 years, he is going to want to, and longing to be with his wife and his son, and missing home, because we're told that he has this nostalgia, this pain that comes from, and the word nostalgia is connected almost with Odysseus's home journey and the pain that comes with it. He is going to have to disguise himself, not reveal who he is. He's going to have to come in the guise of a beggar and not reveal who he is to anyone until you can figure out who you can trust. And so you'll come in incognito. But you're going to have to suffer for that, because people will treat you badly. On the other hand, if they know that you're Odysseus and you've landed back in Ithaca, they will gather together and they will kill you. So it's a strategy. It's a strategy. It's not that he's in his very nature a liar, but it's a strategy to get the means to an end. And he is Polymertes, he's a man of many ways. And that is what Athena loves about him. This is the Greek word, in case you were wondering. Not that you need to know, but it makes me happy to write down Greek ways. Polymertes. Many, polymertes, many ways. Many-minded Odysseus. He finds a way. And it's not the same way. Whereas Achilles is pretty much a great speaker. If you ever read the Iliad, the best speech in the whole Iliad to me is given by Achilles. But he is a straightforward fellow, and he hates the dissemblers. And Odysseus is one of them, another great hero. So what's Homer, who we understand wrote both of them, saying there? Well, there's a place for the straightforward man of combat, and that's the field of war. And then there's a place for careful deceit, strategy, and that is the realm of civilization. Whether we're going to agree with that or not is another matter. I hope we're not going to agree with that as Christians. And to this day, we have an expectation of politicians that they should tell the truth, even while we know that they lie. When they move their lips, they're lying. That's how you know their lips are moving. Otherwise, they might be telling the truth. But unfortunately, it is so. Now, this is not recommended for Christians to act in this way, but it is the way of the world, and it's effective. It's not the Christian standard for conduct, and I'm not recommending it. But this is how Odysseus acts. And the consequence of that is a restoration of order. Remember, the story, the epic begins in chaos. The man he wants to get home, but he can't get home. He's prevented from that, and his kingdom is falling apart. And that's the effect of Poseidon's rule. Anarchy, chaos, disorder, everything being shaken. The hero can't get home. The family can't be reunited. Through Athena's counsel, order is going to be restored. But it's going to take a lot of suffering, and the hero, Odysseus, will have to suffer. And he will have to bear up under it. And he will show his manliness not by beating his enemies down in battle. He's done that already in the Iliad. But by now enduring, by suffering. Which is interesting. The portrait of heroism there. Very interesting. And that there's wisdom in it. And if you think about it as a Christian, I don't want to go too far off on that Christian counsel for wisdom. And the wisdom of Christ in suffering. And again, he was not recognized for who he was. He didn't reveal who he was too quickly. It took time. He allowed people to, even these men he called his disciples, they were around him for 3 years, and they didn't know who he was. And they gradually started to dawn on him that this man is like no other man. No man acts like this. It's not just the miracles he does, that his character is so good that who is this man? And it starts to dawn on them. They say things, and you are the Christ. And he says, this is given to you by the Father. You could not have come upon this on your own, this conclusion. That's very interesting, again, for Christian theology. But the parallel with Odysseus can be drawn, at least. There's some similarities there. And so here we see Odysseus' characters connected with lying and 2, suffering. Long-suffering Odysseus, which is also associated with wisdom in all literature, in all cultures. There's something about being old and being wise. You can be old and a fool, by the way. You'll meet them all the time. But it ought not to be. It ought not to be. Wisdom should come with age. And that means suffering will bring that. So what lesson will you learn from the suffering? Will you curse God or will you praise him? Will you learn that all things act in accordance with his good purposes? Or will you think that things happen according to fate, random chance, and has nothing to do with providence? So those are reflections that I have looking upon the text. But Penelope, if you want to see, and this is a critical reading of the Odyssey, some see Penelope, remember Penelope weaves the shroud for her father-in-law by day, and by night she unweaves it. Some critics have said Penelope's like the moon. She waxes, she wanes. So the shroud grows, the shroud shrinks. She's like the moon, so she's mutable, changeable, deceitful, whereas Odysseus is like the sun. It goes down when he leaves, and the sun arises when he returns. Now this is a sort of a strange allegorical reading of the text. But critics have said, like I said to you last time, what do we make of this text? There seems to be something truthful in it. On the other hand, the portrait of the gods is scandalous. Lying, cheating, deceiving. Can't be. But I said last time that Penelope, any comments or questions, by the way, feel free to interrupt me at any point if you do. Yes, sir.
Well, I just had one when you mentioned how he really embraces the dolos, the
Deceit.
That's just out of a need of this, like that's a necessity, right? Because he's trying to hide his name and his nature, because he really is a strong warrior, a conqueror.
Yes.
And so he embodies and embraces that just by necessity.
He's polymerites. He's many ways. Whatever the way is necessary at that point, that's the one he seizes upon.
And wasn't there another occasion when he did kind of reveal with the Phaeacians, or however you say there, when one guy was really challenging him? And
Yes.
saying, you're not, you're just an old washed up. And he engaged.
Yeah, you're an old washed up man. That's right.
Spear throwing thing, and he really showed off.
Yeah, he threw it so far that they're. And these are the godlike Phaeacians. They're semi-divine, and he's being slighted because what happens? I mean, watch boys when they're together. They're sort of scrapping and fighting, and it's sort of playing. There's a lot of yapping, chirping one another. Right? This is going on between them, and he's getting chirped, as they would say in hockey. And he says, okay, I've had enough, and then he throws it, and he reveals himself by his actions to some degree. But he doesn't really reveal who he is, although he does eventually. He does it when he reveals himself to the king, when he hears a story of the heroes from Troy.
He's crying.
And he's crying. He can't help it. His suffering, it reveals him. That's when he's exposed, but only to the king. The king sees it and recognizes who he must be.
He's wanting to be camouflaged because if they all know his name and his history, it'll make his journey harder. Is that ultimately?
That's his fear, and he's learned from experience, because remember, that in the way that the story is told, he's already learned bitterly that by revealing his name to Poseidon's son, he has had to wait for 10 years to get home. So he doesn't want to do that one again. He's not going to reveal who he is, even to the Phaeacians. But his suffering and hearing that story is what reveals him to the king. And at that point, the king could do one of two things. He could say, oh, you're Odysseus, and you know what? I have an allegiance to Poseidon. I'm going to take care of you. But instead, he finds out, we're going to help you. But he doesn't do that willingly. A wise figure helps him along his way. They give him a ship to get back home. And Poseidon is so outraged at this, he makes sure that this never happens again. The Greek gods agree amongst themselves that the Phaeacians will never again be allowed to thwart the council of the gods. So they make a political decision to placate Poseidon, who's really angry. How dare you? While I'm away getting tribute from the Ethiopians, you go and do this, you allow Odysseus to get home. Okay, yes. But he had to get home, it was fated. Okay, but that can't ever happen again. All right, that will never happen again. We'll write it down. They're not allowed to do that anymore. But you're right, so it is revealed, but there it's unwillingly. It's drawn out of him, and it's discerned by the king, and then finally he says, yes, that's me. Whereas he does it earlier with Polyphemus when he is outraged at the lack of hospitality with which he's received. Like he's eating his companions. He goes expecting, what sort of creatures are you? Are you civilized or are you barbarians? If you're civilized, you'll give us gifts. You'll receive us with hospitality. An expectation throughout the Mediterranean and Near East to this day. If you go to Muslim countries, hospitality is an expectation. Even if you're not a Muslim, if you go to somebody's house, they will expect to treat you well. They will be expected to, and they will. They'll receive you with hospitality. It's one of the things that scandalizes people from that area of the world when they come to Canada, is if they're not treated with hospitality. What sort of people are these? Because it's just a basic cultural expectation, and Christians are called to show hospitality as well. So this is challenging. Yes?
I'm still kind of pondering the name thing and the identity. Do you see any kind of like similarity or vein with Jesus in that same, because they were always questioning like, who are you really? Where are you from? Can you just be plain and tell us like, who are you? And he's not wanting to reveal.
And why?
Before an appointed time.
Right, it's not yet time.
So it's not really.
And they don't know who he is, that's the thing. Oh, you're the Messiah, the king. Okay, well that is who he is. What is their understanding of kingship? He thinks that he's going to wipe the Romans out. So, the whole Jewish people are going to get behind you for sure, because you're going to restore the city of David and you're going to toss these heathen out. That's what you're going to do. That's not his intention. He's not ready to reveal who he is, because his own people will force him before he's had time to acquaint them with who he is and what his ways are. And his ways are not the ways of the world. He's not coming as a conquering general or prince. He's coming to atone for their sins. He has come to die. That's why he came. He says it. That's the reason I came. And who's going to put me to death? The priests, the rabbis, the chief priests. They are going to betray me. What? Yeah, and they will, and they'll hand them over to the Romans. So who's angry with him? Everybody. That's because he's going to atone for all of them. It's a substitutionary atonement. He's going to pay the penalty for the sins that have been committed against God. God, the Messiah, is going to pay for that. That's why he came. But his time is not yet there. So there are similarities there at any rate. But the difference is that Odysseus' suffering does not redeem anyone, other than it restores his kingdom. But there is a parallel of sorts there, and that's interesting. To be an adult is to delay gratification, to experience suffering for the good of others. It's part of your piety. Part of your civic duty is to take abuse and bear up under it for the sake of the good of others. And to teach others to do the same. So, same thing. Anyway, so really interesting though, isn't it? Just the parallels. That alone is interesting. And what will come, not today, we'll come to in a subsequent lecture, we'll talk about Odysseus and what his name means and where he got his name, because that's part of the revelation we come to is, we hear about his scar, which is another way his identity is revealed. His nurse sees the scar on his leg, and then a story is told, and then we're told how he got the name he got. All of these things connected with naming and identity and revealing. It's something, yeah, really interesting. But don't go directly at it. Make sure that the timing is right. So timing is everything. There's practical wisdom being bestowed here. So Penelope, as I say, is renowned for her deceit of the suitors, but that deceit is not just because of a bad character, it's because of good character. It's out of faithfulness to Odysseus. It's because she's being guided by Athena. It's because order is not going to be restored if she allows herself to be married off. She's going to be faithful to her husband, and she is going to use the strategy of a military general to get around what is an overwhelming force of man that she cannot resist directly. So even, and there's an omen in Book 2. An omen is there are two eagles flying together, and then they attack one another, and one kills the other. And there's a dispute over what this omen means. One of them, Halitherses, says that it means that Odysseus is coming home. Another says it was two birds. They fought, one killed the other. That's what it means. So one's a literalist, and one is seeing an allegorical significance to it. The poet who sets up the objective criteria for determining which one of the two is right and who's wrong. And we find out that Zeus sent the eagles, which means Odysseus is coming home. So they know right there in Book 2. But even though it has been told to them, Penelope still doesn't believe it. That's interesting. So she is doing what she's told to do. She sees the omens. She's receiving counsel from Athena, and yet she can't believe what the omens clearly reveal, neither can the suitors. Why is that? So that's also interesting. Why will they not believe that Odysseus is coming home, even though the gods have revealed it? Right? You have a... Go ahead.
They basically said because they basically thought that he died within 20 years, so he passed, and no one expected him to be alive.
Give me a psychological explanation, because I think that's what Homer is after here. If somebody's away for 20 years, it's not. She hasn't forgotten about him. She cries about him all the time. She can't get over him. She's traumatized. She can't get over it. Why will she not believe that he's coming? She won't believe it when Odysseus is standing in front of her and says, "I'm Odysseus." She doesn't believe him. She won't trust him. Why? Yes? No. Yes. Oh, when Odysseus and Penelope are together? Oh, it's in the 20s. It's later on. You haven't got to there yet. Yeah, there's a post-traumatic stress type thing, and also put it this way: if she believes that he's coming home and he doesn't come home, she's going to be destroyed. She's in a state of depression, and anyone who knows anything about the state of depression knows that the worst time in the state of depression isn't when you're at the bottom, it's when you're on your way back up, because you know it can get worse than it, and that's when you're at risk, by the way. It's when you're coming out of depression. So she doesn't even want to hope and have her hopes shattered. She can't do it. She's not able to function. Yes?
I think within that, one of the stages of grief, though they're not perfect, one of them is denial. It's usually the
Yeah.
first one.
Yeah.
And so,
But what an odd thing to deny. It's the thing she most hopes for. But that's characteristic of grief. Right? She's not ready to receive it. So anyone who has a psychological training and talks about the 5 stages of grief and all that, I was a pastor for a while. I understand. I've seen this in person, how this works, and I've experienced grief in my life. I know that it's there, and it's not you move from one stage to the next. You often backtrack. It's up and down and up and down. She can't receive it right now. It's not time. It's psychologically plausible what Homer depicts here. Entirely plausible. So it's very realistic. For all of the machinery of the gods and these omens, whatever we make of them, it is entirely plausible that Penelope, while she's listening and trying and hoping against hope that Odysseus will come home, when an omen is given and it's a sure one from Zeus, she will not believe it. Just like when Jesus comes and they will not believe it. Sometimes the thing you most long for, you can't accept. Because the reality of evidence against you is strong. And it's persuasive in the sense that it's crushing if your hopes are not met by the truth and it's not fulfilled. You will not be able to cope. But if it is true, then everything is different. Everything. So that's really, to me, fascinating. Let me move forward a bit, and I said we're going to get through this, and I'm not even getting anywhere with it because I'm too interested in the subject, the general thing. But let me actually get to the text a little bit. There's a sacrifice that Athena in Book 3 makes to Poseidon, and this is interesting to placate him a little bit. It's 100 cattle. It's a hecatomb. It's an offering of sacrifice to appease her fellow god. It's a large sacrifice. It either suggests great anger in the god or you need a lot of help. And from Poseidon, in this case, he's very angry. Why is he very angry? Well, his son has been maimed. He can't see. And he's only got one eye. One eye's been taken out, and he's a blunt, straightforward individual. So he has been totally rendered useless. He doesn't talk. He doesn't hear very well. He sees and he acts. His eye's been gouged out by Odysseus. His father is incensed. Telemachus is, I said that Athena is going to take Telemachus on a journey, and the purpose of the journey is to take a boy who is unable to act, and unable to act like he's 20 years old, but he doesn't act like he's 20. There's arrested development here. He's not stuck in the basement because there's no basement, but he playing video games because there's no video games. But he is not ready to act like a man and go out but he looks like his father. People say, "Oh, boy, I know who you are. Just look just like your father." Well, is that what you want to hear when you know that you're not able? No, he feels worse about himself. Is that not plausible? I think it's entirely plausible. Think of all the superstars, sons of presidents, prime ministers, the weight on their shoulders. Oh, you're so-and-so's son. It's tough going. A lot to live up to there. Well, you can't do it. Got to be your own man, your own woman. That's the thing. Son of being someone famous, there are good things. That name opens doors. On the other hand, the weight on your shoulder. I had a boy in Durham. His name was Gandhi. You ever heard of a guy? Ever heard of Gandhi? Yeah, he's one of the Gandhi kids. Sent there, and he was not doing very well. He was extraordinarily bright, and his name was so important that he was under assassination threat. So he had a bodyguard and so forth. Wonderful. If he went back to India and he allowed himself his name to run for office, he'd win. And his enemies wouldn't want that. So his name brought great duress to him and distress. There's nothing you can do about it. He also had enormous advantages in life, as you can imagine. I won't talk about him anymore because I would feel badly. He was a decent guy. At any rate, she, Athena, takes him in the guise of mentor to two places. One is to visit Nestor on Pylos. Nestor, we met in the Iliad, who is a wise man, very wise man. She goes to him, first of all, on Pylos. And then, and I'll skip over that, but the second is that they go visit Menelaus of Sparta, the red-haired king. And with him also meet Helen, who started the whole thing when she was taken off to Troy, started the whole war. But they meet the two of them, and we hear from Helena as well, or Helen of Troy. Or Helen of Sparta, I guess it is, now restored to her husband. And when we do hear them, and we hear Telemachus, we hear the story of grief. It's in book 4, so let me just go to book 4 rather than talk in general. Let me actually go to book 4. Where is it? And I'll give you the lines. It is so book 4, page 67. He has a castle that's gleaming gold and amber, silver and ivory. There's a wedding scene. And we learn line 90 thereabouts about the death of his brother's Agamemnon. What does he say, line 90? While I was wandering those parts and bringing together much property, meanwhile another man killed my brother, secretly, by surprise, and by his cursed wife's treachery. So it is with no pleasure I am lord over all these possessions. You will have heard all this from your fathers, whoever your fathers are, for I have suffered much, and destroyed a household that was very strongly settled, and held many goods within it. I wish I lived in my house with only a third part of all these goods, and that the men were alive who died in those days in wide Troy land, far away from horse pasturing Argos. Still and again lamenting all these men, and sorrowing many a time when I am sitting here in our palace, I will indulge my heart in sorrow, and then another time give over, for surfeit of gloomy lamentation comes quickly. But for none of all these, sorry as I am, do I grieve so much as for one, who makes hateful for me my food and my sleep, when I remember, since no one of the Achaeans labored as much as Odysseus labored and achieved, and for him the end was grief for him, and for me a sorrow that is never forgotten for his sake, how he is gone so long, and we know nothing of whether he is alive or dead. The aged Laertes and temperate Penelope must surely be grieving for him, with Telemachus, whom he left behind in his house, a young child. He spoke and stirred in the other the longing to weep for his father, and the tears fell from his eyes to the ground when he heard his father's name, holding with both hands the robe that was stained with purple up before his eyes. Now, this is a common thing when people are weeping. They hold up their cloak to cover their weeping. And Menelaus perceived it, and now he pondered two ways within, in mind and in spirit, whether he would leave it to him to name his father, or whether he would speak first and ask and inquire about everything. So note the wisdom of Menelaus, who has suffered much and who misses his companions and laments the terrible cost of war. It's brought him this terrific castle and much riches. He would give away the riches, and with the riches, his excellence. And his excellence is, this Greek word for excellence is arete, and it's the mark of a man, and his desire to have excellence attributed to him. It's part of his character and his birthright, and the chief way you see this is in his possessions. The possessions are a sign that he is a good man and blessed by the gods. And he would give away 2/3 of that if he could get those men back. So the war has brought him great fame because of his excellence, which is praised by many, but he would give it back to have them back, and chiefly Odysseus. And when the boy Telemachus hears this about his father, he can only weep. And now he reveals himself through weeping. Now there's a parallel because we'll find again Odysseus reveals himself when he weeps about the story told about him. So pain and suffering and the story, and note that the stories do something which no action can do. They change people's hearts and they allow for recovery and a restoration from the grief. These are profound texts. By the way, if you're interested in psychology, psychologists have always found the classics rich minds and depths there for talking about human psychology. So to this day, Jordan Peterson talks about studying the classics, even while in most universities they don't teach the classics anymore. And he laments it. No, it's true, if you have heard him on this. Freud would have cited the classics for his theories, the Oedipus complex and so forth, the Electra complex, both famous historical figures. There are reasons why we read classic texts. Profound, psychologically and otherwise. So he weeps at this, and Menelaus would give it all up to bring back those lives. It shows the tragedy of war. So the Iliad talks about the benefits of it in some sense, and the greatness of Achilles, which is praised there, and his desire to be godlike. He's got no pity. He only wants glory, and he wants it so much that he will be willing to give up his life at a young age to get that glory. And everyone in the Greek culture says, yes, that's what it's all about. Homer in the Odyssey questions all that. Was it all worth it? So we're not left with a clear answer. They are all striving for glory, but they lament the cost of getting it and would rather not have done what they did. But they're not going to stop striving for glory in spite of that. It's a terrible state. They want immortality. They want not to be subject to death. That's what they want. They can't avoid it. They are going to die. And they feel that intensely, this desire to escape death. So, and Helen, when she speaks, and I'm going to skip over it just for the sake of time, not because it's not important, she tells of Odysseus' cunning and discretion, not because of his bloodthirstiness, his ability to win in battle. She tells of his cunning in the Trojan horse episode, but also his discretion. He knew when to speak and when not to. That was the point. He was wise. That's what she speaks and praises him of. She could have said many things. And that's interesting because in other tales, Helen of Troy is compared to Aphrodite, the goddess of love. Not here. Not here. Here, she's not even blamed for leaving Menelaus. She was taken by Paris, the Trojan. Now you'll hear different accounts in different Greek sources. This one, she's not blamed for it. She was schlepped off. Deceived. Tricked. And in retrospect, she tells of her foolishness in almost betraying the men inside the wooden horse because she knew that the Greeks were coming. And she almost said it and gave them away, and the gods stopped her. Athena. So let me skip over that, and I'm going to come to Book 5. Book 5, I said, is an interesting book. Remember, I drew the sort of the schema overview of the structure of the Odyssey last time, and I said Book 5 didn't really fit, and it doesn't. It doesn't fit because it's in the middle of nowhere. Well, actually, it's not in the middle of nowhere. It's in the middle of the whole known world. It's a place called Ogidja. It's an island. And it's said to be in the navel of the world. So it's right in the belly button. It's the center of everything. But where it is exactly is unclear. I remember back in Book 1, Athena recommended to Zeus that they send Hermes to go tell that woman, Calypso, to let Odysseus go because she's keeping him. She's keeping him. And she's acting in accordance with her name. Where's the eraser? Oh, I can't go over there. Yes, I can. I'm going to walk over there. Calypso. You will know this word, whether you recognize it immediately or not. In 2 words. Very interesting, right? Calypso means to hide. A eucalyptus is something that provides good shade. It's a big leafy tree. It provides good shade. The EU means well. It's the Greek adverb. So it provides good shade, a eucalyptus tree. An apocalypse is something that was hidden and is now revealed. It's taken out from what was hidden. It's now pulled out. The apocalypse, or the book of Revelation, which is saying the same thing, is it's revealing something that was hidden. Well, actually, if you read the book of Revelation, you find that everything there is citing something in the Old Testament. Though the entire book almost is citing Old Testament scripture and even some New Testament passages over and over. So almost verbatim, the lines put together. But yet it was hidden. Well, why was it hidden? Because people, even though the signs were given, they didn't get it. And now it's all out. The cat's totally out of the bag. She's on Calypso. Well, what's she hiding? She's hiding Odysseus. And Odysseus, nobody knows where he is. And for him to achieve his arete, his excellence, he must be revealed. He must be restored. He must get back home. And now he is on the island of Calypso, and she's hiding him. And what's she doing with him while she's hiding him? She's loving him and giving him food for the gods that will keep him eternal. He will live forever. He will be immortal. Is that not what every man wants? Immortality. That's what the Greeks want. They want immortality. She offers it to him. He's eating ambrosia, the food of the gods. That's the word for it in Greek, ambrosia. He's eating ambrosia, drinking the nectar of the gods. He could live eternally, but he is weeping because he doesn't want to be with the nymph, although the nymph is a goddess, so she's more beautiful than his wife, perhaps. And she's eternal. Her beauty will not fade, but he doesn't want to be with her. It's a false home. It's not fit for a man. This sort of eternal life is not fit for a man. His son is left at home. His wife is left at home. His kingdom is left without a king. He's responsible. He wants to get home. He desires that. It pains him not to be at home. And this is a sort of a false home because he's getting, again, more immortality with a goddess. But it's not enough. So but it's a false home. It represents nature in its idealized form. She's in a cave, some of the psychological sort see this as a womb image or something like that. I'm not going to get into all that. But Calypso is presented as, what is she doing? She's weaving on her loom, just like Penelope, and singing. This is what, I guess, women in the Greco-Roman world would do anyway. They're weaving. That's just on the loom. That's standard practice. And the nymph is doing it as well. But it symbolizes her deceit. What's the nature of the deceit? It's almost a religious one. She's giving him a false paradise. One not fit for a mortal man. And she forces him to love her and make love to her. Now, when I say this, the women over the years have said, yeah, right. And Homer doesn't even explore it. So it's there, and I've heard there's an expectation on Penelope that she be faithful, and yet Odysseus is not. Right? The double standard and so forth. And there's certainly, that's clearly the case that he is expected, but I think given the fact that she is of divine nature, she has no choice. He has no choice, rather. And Penelope, one of her concerns about Odysseus when he comes home, he might be a god, disguising himself as her husband, and would make her unfaithful to her husband. You look like Odysseus, you talk like Odysseus, you act like Odysseus, but I don't believe you are Odysseus. So here's the trick. You tell me something that only the two of us knows. And then when he tells her, and I'm not going to give it away because you haven't got through the book yet, I don't think, so I won't give it away. When he tells her what only the two of them could possibly know, then she finally breaks. But she's testing, questioning, probing, and not trusting until that point. Even when she sees him and he looks like him, and he talks like him, and he's just slaying all the suitors, he's standing in front of her, she still doesn't believe who he is, which is the way he was supposed to be. He's not to trust anyone. She's like him. They're two of a kind. Penelope is almost the mirror image of Odysseus in terms of her wisdom, not trusting. You have to make certain, because even the gods can deceive. They can come in the guise of human beings. Trust no one.
Wouldn't the gods know it as well, or none of them are omnipotent in any way?
Omniscient. No, they don't know everything. But the gods normally have a capacity for seeing through that sort of thing. Yeah. But she's not a god, and neither is Odysseus.
She said, "Tell me something only we would know."
Right.
They would, like.
Oh, and yeah, the gods wouldn't know that. Yeah. They would recognize another god and see through that sort of disguise. How they do that, I have no idea. But they don't know everything about everything that's ever happened. That's not a capacity they seem to have. So this Greek word kalypto, to cover, to hide, is here. And this seems to be a monomyth of sorts, in which there's a heroic journey in which the hero journeys from the real world to the supernatural world and then comes back to the real world. That's what's going on here. There's a sort of a circular pattern. And that's what marks Odysseus out as a hero. He is doing something that is impossible for a man to do. And yet, he does it. And furthermore, it seems to have significance for the human race, even though we don't believe in the Homeric gods. We believe that there is some greater significance to our life than the mundane going through the motions. This is what I do now. That there seems to be a greater significance. Now, this was presented to me when I was not a Christian as an undergraduate. I see it differently now. But even back then, I thought, there's something here. There really is something to this. And the psychologists think so too. But Odysseus is imprisoned there. He is weeping. For we're told that the nymph did not please him. Let me see here. What page is this? It's lines 85 or there. No, it's not that. It's after that. So book 5, and he sends Hermes. Hermes goes. Now this is interesting. Hermes goes. It repeats what we heard at the outset, that Athena goes to Zeus. Send Hermes. Hermes goes there with wings on his heels, the messenger of the gods, from the word from which we get hermeneutics, by the way. It's the divine messenger, Hermes. And he goes to tell the nymph to let him go, and he does exactly that. When he tells her, does she do what she's told? Not exactly. She's a goddess. She's deceitful. She wants to find a way around it. And so Odysseus, in order to get out, is going to have to make sure that she's willing to do it. And so he won't trust her even when she gives her word that she's going to let him go. So there's constant a lack of trust as a mark of wisdom. Don't trust anyone at their word. Make sure. Make them swear. And they do. Off he goes. He meets her, that is Calypso, Singing, line 61, inside the cave with a sweet voice as she went up and down the loom and wove with a golden shuttle. There was a growth of grove around the cavern, flourishing. Alder was there, and the black poplar, and the fragrant cypress, birds with spreading wings who made their nests in it, etc., etc. There, line 75, the courier, Argefontes, the slayer of Argos, stood and admired it, what he saw. But after he had admired all in his heart, he went into the wide cave, nor did the shining goddess Calypso fail to recognize him when she saw him come into her presence. For the immortal gods are not such as to go unrecognized by one another, not even if one lives in a far home. But Hermes did not find great-hearted Odysseus indoors, but he was sitting out on the beach, crying, as before now he had done, breaking his heart in tears, lamentation, and sorrow. As weeping tears he looked out over the barren water. But Calypso, shining among goddesses, questioned Hermes when she'd seated him on a chair that shone and glittered. How is it, Hermes of the golden staff, you've come to me? I honor you and love you, but you've not come much before this. Speak what is in your mind. My heart is urgent to do it if I can, and if it is a thing that can be accomplished. But come in with me so I can put entertainment before you. And she then gives him a ambrosia and red nectar, and he eats and drinks, and then he tells her why he's come, and it is to release this man, Odysseus. I'll skip over this. She does the will of the gods, but only after Odysseus has to do what Hermes suggested to make sure that she does this, because he doesn't trust her even when she says she's going to let him go. Because I think this had happened before. Oh yes, okay, I'll let her go. And then he trusts her, and then he's betrayed by her. This is why he's brokenhearted. So now when she says, I've been told by Zeus to let you go, he doesn't trust her. He's been there before. And she does let him go. When she lets him go, he goes on a raft, and the raft is broken up by Poseidon. Poseidon sees him. What? He's got off that island. He's not hidden anymore. There he is. I was wondering where that Odysseus was. Shipwreck. And he's thrown. I'll come to the end of book 5. I think this is where I want to pick it up. Line 406. He sees ragged rocks and surf, and he's being thrown against the rocks, and he's going to die. That's what he sees. And Odysseus says, the knees of Odysseus gave way for fear, and the heart inside him, and deeply troubled he spoke to his own great-hearted spirit. Ah me, now that Zeus has granted a sight of unhoped-for land, and now I have made the crossing of this great distance, I see no way for me to get out of the grey sea water. For on the outer side are sharp rocks, and the surf about them breaks and roars, and the sheer of the cliff runs up above them, and the sea is deep, close inshore, so that there is no place to stand, bracing on both my feet, and so avoid trouble. I fear that as I climb out, a great wave will catch and throw me against the stony cliff. That will be a pitiful landing. Yet if I try to swim on along in the hope of finding beaches that slant against the waves or harbors for shelters, I fear that once again the whirlwind will snatch me and carry me out on the sea where the fish swarm, groaning heavily, or else the divinity from the deep will let loose against me a sea monster, of whom Amphitrite keeps so many, for I know how bitterly the renowned earthshaker hates me. So he doesn't know what to do. And at that moment, Athena intervenes and pulls him into, and he prays, and the river god allows him to land. And he drags himself up, all of his clothes ripped off his back. He's naked, and he crawls up onto the landing of the not a beach, but a river. It's mud, and he covers himself over the leaves so he doesn't freeze to death at night. Because at night it gets very cold. So he covers himself up and collapses in exhaustion. I'll use the metaphor, and this is a simile, rather, a heroic simile, which are used throughout the epic, by the way. I'll come to many of them. At 488, as when a man buries a burning log in a black ash heap in a remote place in the country where where none live near as neighbors, and saves the seed of fire, having no other place to get a light from? So Odysseus buried himself in the leaves, and Athena shed a sleep on his eyes so as most quickly to quit him, by veiling his eyes from the exhaustion of his hard labor. So he has landed now. Where has he landed? He has no idea. He has no idea where he is. He is now on the land of the Phaeacians. So he's got off the island of Ogygia. He has escaped the covering of Calypso. So now he is revealed, but he's in a place. The Phaeacians are these half gods, half men. Or they're divine figures. Never mind, they're not half men. But it's a world that seems to be between the Olympian gods and the world of men. But he has no idea where he is, and how is he going to get home from here? Because this is not home. This is not Ithaca. It's this other place. How is he going to get home? Well, Athena is working here, and she goes to a young girl who happens to be a princess. Her name is Nausicaa. Famous in her own right. She's a princess, daughter of great-hearted Alcinous, and gets her to persuade her father to let her have the chariot to go wash clothes, which is, I guess, what young maidens do in that day. So let us go down to the river and wash clothes. Whose clothes? My brother's, because she's washing clothes for her brothers who are princes. Let me go do that. And Daddy, can I have the car? Basically. Sure, go on. Take the car. Don't forget. Daddy dear, 57, will you not have them harness me the wagon, the high one with the good wheels, so that I can take the clothing to the river and wash it? Now it is lying about all dirty, and you yourself, when you sit among the first men in council and share their counsels, ought to have clean clothing about you. Note that she's being deceitful. She wants one thing, she says another. And also you have 5 dear sons who are grown in the palace. 2 of them married, the other 3 are sprightly bachelors, and they are forever wanting clean, fresh clothing to wear it when they go to dance. And it is my duty to think about all this. So she spoke, but she was ashamed to speak of her joyful marriage to her dear father. But he understood all and answered, yes.
Wait, so is it normal? So I'm confused because is it normal for the princess to wash the clothes, or is it just like her maid to run the wash and she's just using it as an excuse?
Well, the women will do it, but it's normal for her to supervise and see that it happens. Make sure that it is so. She just wants to get out of the house. So she says, I'm going to go do it, and it would not be. So, and she wants to get out in the chariot, right? The one with the big wheels, and like that one, not any old chariot, that like the bling chariot. That's the one. That's the one I want, you know. I do not begrudge you the mules, child, nor anything else. So go, and the serving men will harness the wagon. The high one with the good wheels that has the carrying basket. Okay, all right. So she's got the super duper chariot. And he knows what she's after. She wants to get married. He knows that. And he lets her go. She doesn't say that because she's embarrassed to say that to her father. But her father understands. Sure, take that one out. Now, so she goes out. She's at a marriageable age. She's the one who's going to come across Odysseus. Now, this is all the cunning of Athena. Okay, cunning. All right, but think about this. This is a young woman who's of marriageable age, and she's going to come across Odysseus. What the heck? What condition is Odysseus in? Where did we leave him off? He's got no clothes on. He's covered in mud and leaves. That's not a good first meeting. Well, he's Odysseus as well. Like the guy's built like Superman, I guess. But he's covered in mud and he's naked. This isn't. And she wants to get married, so what's going to happen here? What is going to happen here? This is interesting. And while they're, the reader's thinking this, I think, like, okay, this is interesting. While they are playing with a ball. And they throw the ball, and the ball just happens to go a little bit too far and falls in the water, and the princesses shriek. 115. Now the princess threw the ball towards one handmaiden and missed the girl, and the ball went into the swirling water. And they all cried out aloud, and noble Odysseus wakened and sat up and began pondering in his heart and his spirit. Ah, me. What are the people whose land I've come to this time? Because remember, he spent 9 years wandering. He has no idea of what's going on here. What are they like? Are they violent and savage and without justice, or hospitable to strangers with a godly mind? See now how an outcry of young women echoes about me, of nymphs who keep the sudden and sheer high meadow places, and springs of the rivers and the grass of the meadows. Or am I truly in the neighborhood of human people I can converse with? But come now, I myself shall see what I can discover. So speaking, Odysseus came from under his thicket, line 127, book 6, and from the dense foliage with his heavy hand he broke off a leafy branch to cover his body and hide the male parts. And that's good. And when in the confidence of his strength, here's the epic simile, like some hill-kept lion who advances, though he is rained on and blown by the wind, and both eyes kindle. He goes out after cattle or sheep, or it may be deer in the wilderness, and his belly is urgent upon him to get inside of a close steading and go for the sheep flocks. So Odysseus was ready to face young girls with well-ordered hair. Naked though he was, well, this is a metaphor of threat. He's like a mountain lion coming down. So what's going to happen here? The metaphor or the simile that's given suggests, this is not good. He was ready to face the young girls with well-ordered hair, naked though he was, for the need was on him. And yet he appeared terrifying to them, all crusted with dry spray. The salt's dried on him, right? So he's white from that. And they scattered one away and another down the jutting beaches. Only the daughter of Alcinous stood fast, Nausicaa. The other girls run in terror at him. She stands firm. For Athena put courage into her heart and took the fear from her body, and she stood her ground and faced him. And now Odysseus debated whether to supplicate the well-favored girl by clasping her knees, which is the standard thing. Now think about this. The standard mark of a civilized person when you come to somebody you want hospitality to is to fall on your knees and grab them by the knees. You're bending down. If you're an adult naked male, you don't want to do this to a young woman. It's not a good idea. Well, should I do this or that? Well, it would show that he was civilized to do this. But the context suggests maybe that's not the best idea. She might misunderstand. For fear if he clasped her knees, the girl might be angry. So blandishingly and full of craft, he began to address her. I am at your knees. So he's tipping his hand. He ought to be at his knees, but he knows better than to be at his knees. I'm at your knees, O queen, but are you mortal or goddess? Blandishingly, are you a goddess? If indeed you are one of the gods who hold wide heaven, then I must find in you the nearest likeness to Artemis, the huntress, the daughter of great Zeus, for beauty, figure, and stature. But if you are one among those mortals who live in this country, 3 times blessed are your father and the lady your mother, and 3 times blessed your brothers too. And I know their spirits are warmed forever with happiness at the thought of you, seeing such a slip of beauty taking her place in the chorus of dancers. But blessed at the heart, even beyond those others, if that one who, after loading you down with gifts, leads you as his bride home. I have never with these eyes seen anything like you, neither man nor woman. So he's pouring it on. Okay, all right, but she wants to be married, and now we have Odysseus here, so what's going to happen? Right, so there's tension in the scene, and you can imagine it's well done. The wonder takes me, and I once saw in Delos, where by Apollo's altar, a young palm tree shooting up, and it was like you. Now you may say, okay, you had me up to there, and now you compared me to a palm tree.
She thought palm.
And that's not working for me. They're like, what? A palm tree? But they use the same sort of imagery in Song of Songs as well. Women are compared to, right? So this type of imagery is not dependent on a physical comparison. It's something of value and of beauty. Right? That's the way the poetry in the ancient world works. It's not quite the same way ours does. But again, in biblical love poetry, exactly the same thing. You know, your teeth are like sheep coming up from the dip. Well, that, like, really? And your breasts are like pomegranates. Oh? Yeah? Like the Tower of David. What? It's a big like, what? Really? Oh. But that's the poetry, right? So it's just accepted as it is. It's something of value. So he gets to her, he speaks to her, and she discerns, she's wise. And she brings him to her father. And he doesn't want to come on the cart because the men in the city might assume the worst. Like, she suggests that he get in the cart and ride back with her, and the men in the city, having said that, they see a man riding with the young woman, they'll think that this man has taken advantage of her out in the wilderness, and they'll be furious with him, so let's not do that. So there's all sorts of things. Now, again, I said to you that the epic has certain marks. I'm going to go through them in detail, but one of the marks is that it is encyclopedic. I said that Homer is the teacher of all Hellas, and it is encyclopedic in the sense that it teaches people how to behave in every situation in life. Here it teaches us how a young woman should greet a stranger, and how she should be wise about it, and how a man who is visiting a young woman, he should act. Don't do what we normally do and grab her by the knees. And think about that. You could say, I am at your knees. So you're showing that you're civilized, you're giving due respect, but you can't be misunderstood, because again, you can be. Yes?
So that's a different kind of, is there a name for that kind of wisdom? Because that's different than the deceitful. Like,
it is, but it's all implicated in it. So you're right, but knowing hospitality seems to be universal.
But even with the cart thing and not going in, like, that's some good.
That's prudence, we would call it in English. That's prudence. How could I be understood? How would others see me? And that comes with experience to some degree.
Okay.
And that comes with, and this is one of the reasons that Telemachus has to leave home. He's never been outside and seen how different people behave differently, and so he doesn't know what it's like to come back and look at his own culture and see it differently. I had to learn this. I spent 12 years in Europe. I came back to Canada and said, what is going on here? Canadians are weird. I'm a Canadian, but like, what? Really? This is what we do. Why do we do that? Are we running out of time? We still have 5 minutes. I will use every moment of time at my disposal here. But he shows that he's aware of the need for supplication, and he flatters her. Now, later writers, Milton will use this scene of flattery and use it when Satan flatters Eve. He will pick it up. So remember that when you come to that book 9, Paradise Lost, there are similarities there. Milton is not so sure that flattery is a great thing. And you all rolled your eyes and groaned or laughed when it was read out, because he was really pouring it on. Obviously, but she's hearing, who does not like flattery? There's a reason flattery works. And so she's impressed. She takes him to her father. When she goes to her father, at that point, we get the contest, first of all, and you said, like, the men are sort of like, who is this guy? And he doesn't tell them. And he looks like he was strong at one point, but he looks a little beaten up now. He's seen better days. Let's see if he can run. And he says, I've been at sea I can't run right now, but let's have a contest of throwing things. And he whips it beyond them, and they're like, uh-oh, who's this guy? And then he hears the story about Odysseus and his companions, and he weeps. And the king Alcinous, Nausicaa's father, says, okay, I know who you are. Tell us who you are, stranger. Tell us some stories about yourself. So that's what happens in books 9 to 12. You can see I'm not even getting up to where I said I would get. And there you go. Surprise, surprise. This is a microcosm of the whole work, what happens here. It's a story within the story. And there's an archetypal literary pattern here of losing and recovering. What was lost has now been found. The pearl of great price, if you will. It's archetypal. Things are being lost and now they're being found. Odysseus himself lost, now he's going to be restored. The return of the king. Tolkien. Right? The king has been away for a long time. So long that people don't think he's ever coming back. But now he's come back. And in the process of doing this, the memory of these things causes pain. There's no avoiding it. The pain is a necessary part of storytelling. And good stories, the best stories, have pain in them. But not just pain. So there's an extreme metamorphosis of identity here. And the story of suffering, which he tells from in Book 8 and onward, is the means of recovering from what was lost. It's almost like telling your story is a way of getting over the suffering that the story tells. People use this in psychology. It's called narrative therapy. But it's not. There are times when you don't want to talk. But there are times when you can talk. There's also a time when you can listen to a story like this, and the suffering of Odysseus seems vicarious. You participate in his sufferings and you benefit from it without yourself going through it. And there's a hope that is kindled in you. So these powerful stories have a therapeutic function. I think they actually do. Not all stories work like that, but the best stories do, I think. So it's a sort of poetic transgression that takes place here. And Aristotle, who I'll be talking about in my lit theory class in an hour or two, calls this mimesis. And let me just finish with this. Mimesis, which is the art of representation or imitation. Imitation of reality through poetry. There's a universal truth. It is Odysseus' story, but it's a story that seems to have significance for everyone who listens to it. Hence an archetype. And that's what Aristotle says poetry does. It teaches us truths about human nature that hold true across ages. That's what the best stories do. And this is one of them. I will pick it up next time, and I will try and move along, and I will want to come to the blinding of Polyphemus, because that's a key episode, and the loss of the men at Scylla and Charybdis and all that sort of stuff. But then I'll move on to that, so please try and read ahead, and essay questions will be coming as well. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.